So thanks very much for allowing me to speak about market research and a bit about myself. I've been in the group for a couple of months now, so I think it's kind of feels like I haven't got around to sort of saying hello to everybody, but I've met a few of you. I'm intending to meet more of you as time goes on. So if you wanted to have a chat off this call at some point, then I'd really be interested to sort of set up a one-to-one. It's important, I think, to sort of share a little bit about myself before I kind of go on to talk about my business. So here are some ridiculous photos of me as a child. Perhaps I'm sharing a little bit too much, but I think for most of us, our kind of story probably starts in childhood, and for me, definitely, I think when I reflect on where I am now, a lot of what my beliefs and values that I hold kind of close to me now are kind of probably formed in childhood. So I was the youngest of 3 boys, got 2 older brothers. You know, that helped me kind of build up my resilience muscle for sure. My name is Gideon, which is, you know, I don't think I've probably met about 2 or 3 maybe other Gideons in my life. When I was a child in the 80s, there was a cartoon called Gideon the Duck, which had a ridiculously long neck, so that kind of helped again build some resilience, and then the kind of, you know, the haircuts, the clothing, you know, yeah, so resilience is something I've learned for sure. And the other thing I kind of learned, I guess, a lot later in my career, I started out as a market researcher. I went into kind of the corporate world. A lot of people fall into market research, but I kind of actively chose it. I think I was really interested in, you know, what's not to like. You're kind of asking questions, you're finding out things, you're collecting data. It really kind of satisfies that curious nature, I think, and we're all probably a little bit curious about stuff. So I really enjoy, you know, finding things out, solving problems, you know, creating stories from data. But I didn't enjoy my kind of, if I reflect back, I didn't really enjoy that kind of corporate life. So I worked, when I was in an agency at the start of my career, I worked with AOL, and I spent hours and hours, you know, up until very late at night, just changing colors on a bar chart because that's what AOL wanted. I got quite disillusioned by working in places like the BBC and Lloyd's Banking Group because of the way that they used research or didn't use research. Often it was kind of, they paid lots and lots of money for doing research and nothing was done on the back of it. The market research industry was another frustration, you know, sort of very much geared towards helping corporates. There's little or no, as far as I'm aware, there's little or no kind of effort going into really helping smaller businesses, startups, you know, where there is an absolute need to kind of understand customers, validate ideas, you know, test out new products. So I kind of was in London at this point. I think I've probably done sort of 10 years or into my career, had a couple of young kids, and we decided to kind of up and leave. So we left London, we moved out, we thought we were being a little bit more pioneering. We went beyond Maidenhead, we went beyond Reading, we raced through Swindon and ended up in Bath. My wife's originally from this part of the world, and funnily enough, you know, half the people we've met here since we've settled here have all done the same thing. So, and I think that's only increasing. So there is a bit of a perhaps not an exodus, but there's definitely a kind of migration of people, I think, out to different parts of the country, probably helped by COVID and lockdown. So that's kind of my story. I was told at the time when I left London, no, this is the end of your career, and I guess in some ways it was, but it was also the kind of start of a different career, which I would describe as a very sort of bumpy ride. I set up my own business, which I guess, partly being the youngest of 3 boys, I'd always kind of struggled for a bit of control and a bit of independence in my life. So I kind of aspired to kind of be my own boss, which I guess many of us probably have done. I set up a business. I was a contractor, a freelancer. I bumbled along, you know, managed to get some work together. There were some very kind of dark times when there was no work and we were kind of borrowing money out of the kids' savings accounts without them knowing. and obviously putting it back as when we could. And then I think kind of something that transformed my kind of business career, if you like, was going through an accelerator program. So I went through the NatWest accelerator program in 2019, just probably about 6 months before lockdown, and that really opened up my my mindset. So I was introduced to this idea of growth mindset, which I've not really come across before. Kind of found that late in life. I discovered more about myself. There's a book I'd really recommend called Simple Tips, Smart Ideas. And in that, there's an exercise that suggests you kind of really look into yourself and kind of pull out everything that's important to you. Go through your kind of life history, go through your career history, what people have paid you to do. So I guess it's a little bit like Ikigai. You know, you sort of you understand more about yourself, what's important to you, what you can do, what you can how you can earn money, and what your kind of purpose might be. And that kind of helped me evolve the business into what it is now, which is called Customer IQ. And we specialize in customer research and insight specifically for startups. So I can't really move on, you know, from talking about market research and startups without addressing some elephants in the room. And I think this is a conversation that I could talk about for another half an hour, but I'm not going to. Just to acknowledge there are some elephants. You know, when you think about market research, particularly about startup businesses, there's obviously an issue around cost. There's an issue around the truth. You know, do people actually tell you what they really think? Do people know what they really think? Do people, how can you expect people to know what they don't know? And, you know, research can take a long time. And in a fast-moving, kind of fast-paced environment, it's not always that helpful. So I could kind of, I could tackle those now. I won't. I'll just put some comments on that slide. But what I thought would be useful for the rest of this short talk, and I aim to finish in the next kind of 10 or 15 minutes, so we've got time for some questions, is just to give you some tips, some advice that from me. You know, some things you can take, some things you can leave, but just generally some advice for anyone thinking about doing some research. Maybe they're thinking about buying some research, or maybe you're thinking about doing your own research. So there's a little bit for everybody here, hopefully. So I'll just kind of run through these. I can't see your faces, so if you do have any comments or questions, just jump off mute and I'll answer.
Yeah, Gideon,
so
anyone with their hands up, we'll let you know as well, yeah?
Awesome, thank you, Gary. So the first thing I'd always advise, you know, if you're looking to do some new research, the question that we should be asking ourselves is, does your research already exist? Has it already been done by somebody else? And, you know, there are tools obviously you can use to find that out. You can do a Google search, put in some smart search terms around the kind of thing that you're looking to do. Very often you'll find there's a report that you can download, maybe you can buy it, that will satisfy not all of those, not give you all the answers you might need, but certainly help you kind of understand. So if you were targeting, I don't know, let's say first-time parents, or if you were targeting, you know, Gen Z, there's probably tons of research that already exists about those audiences. So if you're looking to kind of understand those audiences, then definitely kind of do some desk research. Go to Google, you know, ChatGPT and other generative AI tools would be really helpful in this area too, potentially, because they can kind of obviously surmise whatever's available on the internet about particular audiences. So I've been using ChatGPT in particular as a kind of research assistant to help me understand what customer needs are in particular areas. I've even got it to write me a questionnaire, which has been a bit hit and miss, but I guess it gives you a kind of a starting point from which you can then kind of edit. So there's some really good tools, but critically, I think, you know, does your research already exist? Because if it does, there's no need for you to kind of do it necessarily. I'd break research down into very simple, straightforward parts as well. I think if you one of the big frustrations I have when you talk to people in the industry, it's as in, what was that a question? No. as with lots of industries, it's full of jargon. It's unnecessarily complicated. You know, you've got all these words and terms that kind of don't really mean anything. If I fire out things like quantitative research, qualitative research, you know, it's only there to really confuse people. So let's kind of break it down at its most simplest. Research is about asking questions, creating some questions that you deliver to people. So those are the kind of three things you need. You need some questions, you need a way of getting those questions to some people. So don't feel like it's something that's you know, akin to brain surgery or rocket science. It's not like that. It's a very simple process. And actually, you know, having a conversation with somebody, like a pre-sales call or just an introductory call, if you have a kind of list of questions by your desk, by your computer, that you can just kind of refer to, that just help kind of understand who that person is, what they're thinking, what their needs are, what their problems are, what their frustrations are. You know, you're basically doing research. So maybe just kind of think about that when you're talking to potential clients and customers. I'd say as well, if you're going to use a supplier, definitely shop around. It's an incredibly mature market. You perhaps kind of unaware of that because it's so much geared towards kind of big businesses and corporations. But that was a LinkedIn search yesterday, companies in the UK who are in the category of market research, and it throws up like 5,500 results. And granted, a lot of those will be companies that form the supply chain to market research companies, but it is incredibly mature. There are agencies and suppliers and consultants that are super specialist in lots of different areas. So if you're thinking about buying some research and it's a particularly niche area, there's probably somebody out there that can help you and has that experience and has that specialism. It might be me, but it might not be. So if you wanted to approach me, I could kind of help you find that person. Next tip, don't believe the hype. I haven't put on this slide who this company is, but there's a swathe of new tech kind of entering the research market. A lot of them are kind of offering self-serve platforms. So, you know, you basically just go, there's no interaction with a human necessarily. You just set up an account, you put in your questions, it sends your questions out to a bunch of people and you get your data. You know, it's super easy, it's super convenient, but it's going to cost you a lot of money to do it that way. So I saw one of these platforms yesterday is offering what looks like a really, really cost-effective way of doing research, because they're only it's 40p per response. And that, to me, I'm like, wow, that's amazing. You know, imagine getting a survey completed for 40p. Let's do it. This is awesome. And then you look at the finer detail, and actually, well, you know, it's like what we term a response is actually one person answering one question. So it's not a whole survey. So if you have, you know, if you have a survey of 25 questions and you want to send that to 1,000 people, it's going to cost you, through this platform, it's going to cost you £10,000, which to me is a little bit out of range, you know, and I'm sure you'll probably agree. And actually, I know that you can probably get the same kind of data, super high quality, by paying between sort of £1,000 and £2,000. So these platforms, you know, are delivering a super convenient service, but bear in mind you're going to be paying for that in some way. Another thing I would suggest is to kind of think beyond the customer interview. I think there's so much advice out there on YouTube, in book form, you know, articles, posts, helping startups to kind of understand their customers. And I'd say 95% of the time, the advice is talking about customer interviews. And don't get me wrong, customer interviews are great. It's an amazing tool that you can deploy really easily. You know, you create a set of questions, as I said earlier, you find someone to talk to, and hey presto, you're doing research. But it's not the only way, and it is quite time consuming. So I'd say, you know, think about deploying the right tool for the right job. You know, you're never going to be able to measure your market opportunity with a bunch of customer interviews. You know, they are not going to give you that data that you need to say, you know, 60% of our target audience are interested in our concept, or we know that there are X number of million people in our market. Another tool, the focus group, it gets quite a bad press, but actually there are certain topics where you would want to kind of have a group discussion, because what that will allow you to do is to kind of open up and bounce ideas around a group, and you get feedback and you'll get discussion, and you're never going to get kind of discussion from a customer interview, a one-on-one interaction. So if you're looking for something, more of a discussion where ideas can kind of build and grow, and people can kind of test things out and agree with each other or disagree with each other, that's where I think some of the finer details, some of that real insight will come from. So definitely think about maybe doing a group discussion. You can easily do it on Zoom or different platforms. It's much more easy these days with technology. And then there are other ways of doing research. There are platforms where you can kind of listen to what's happening on social media, or generally on the internet, Reddit, what are people talking about, put in some keywords and just monitor that and see how that grows. And that's a way of measuring things, but it's also a way of getting some interesting insights potentially. So there are more ways of doing research than just the customer interview. I would recommend the MARM test as a good kind of reference guide. Certainly the first half of that book for me is brilliant as a way of kind of helping people understand what kind of questions to ask and what kind of questions to avoid, and listening to the responses and kind of understanding what people may really be thinking. So the second half of the book, not so keen on, because it kind of goes into kind of sales mode, and I think, for me, you should try and separate research and sales. But the first half for sure is a really, really good reference. I'm sure many of you have read it, or it's probably on your reading list. But definitely, it's summer holidays are coming up. It's an easy read. I'd definitely get hold of a copy of that if you haven't read it. Certainly, another tip would be, if you're thinking about doing some research, if you've compiled a survey and you want to send it out, do some testing of that. And I came across this article on Forbes yesterday, which kind of plays into this idea. So the grandma test, I think that applies to everything you're doing, your website copy, your business model, it definitely applies to things like surveys. So you need to think about, can everyone understand what we're talking about? Take out that jargon, make sure that you're wording your questions so that they're very clear, so that there's no ambiguity in those questions. So the worst thing you can possibly have is a question with ambiguity in. You collect your data, you come back to do your analysis, and you realize half the people have answered it one way and half have answered it a different way, and therefore your data is just not usable. Questions should be really easy to answer. Don't ask people to tell you how much they spent on cucumbers in the last 5 years, because they're just not going to know. So think about how easy those questions are to answer, and try and engage people. Any topic can be interesting, if you're using a mixture of question types, if you're putting in maybe some fun questions in between some that are a little bit drier. So try not to make the survey too long. Keep it short, keep it easy to answer, keep it punchy. And my final tip would be, of course, to follow my business. So if you wanted to join my mailing list, you can do. There's a QR code that will take you to my website where there's a form to fill in. I'm doing a monthly webinar, which is each time is slightly different in terms of topics, but kind of aimed at helping startup founders to kind of either buy or do their research. So there are some videos already up on YouTube, which are collecting almost double-figure views. So that would be worth a boost if you could visit those. And I'm on LinkedIn a lot. There's only 2 Gideon Barkers as far as I can find on LinkedIn, and I'm hunting down the other one quickly. So yeah, let's connect. Let's chat and kind of engage with each other on LinkedIn would be super. And finally, just to thank you, I just wanted to thank you for your time, for listening, and very happy to take any questions or thoughts or comments that you might have.
Thank you very much, Gideon. A very timely reminder the importance market research is for our businesses and how it can really have a big impact. Over to you, Tom.
Hey, Gideon. You know I love what you do. I've got a question, and I'm sorry if this is a tough question because I don't want to undermine what you just said, but you've just given us a whole load of tips about how we might start this process ourselves. I have a fundamental question. Should we? Because in as much as you talked about truth and said the problem is with some people is they can't tell you the truth, it takes a hell of a lot to really understand the questions we should even be asking. And is actually one of the things we should say today, and maybe I need to say it for you, is to say, actually, don't dream of trying to do this yourself. Get Gideon to do it. That's what he does. So should we, to what extent should we, how far should we go with doing the things that you've suggested we can do? And at what point should we say, you've got a whole load of cognitive biases that are going to get in your way in terms of formulating the questions to ask? And at that point, what's the point at which you need to get some help?
I think that's a really great question. Thank you, Tom. And I think, I'll happily straddle the fence on it a little bit, because I think there's a kind of practical answer, there's a practical response to that, and then there's a kind of best practice response to that, if you see what I mean. So absolutely, I agree with you. Why would you do something that an expert can do, and it might be me, or it might be one of many other people in the industry. And yes, rubbish in, rubbish out. If you're not putting good quality thinking and inputs into that process, then what you get back at the end won't be great. And if you're making big decisions on this rubbish out, then the decision making is going to suffer. At the same time, I think I have to acknowledge that many founders are going to do their own research because they don't have many other options, right? So they can't afford to go to a research agency, and we can see how expensive it is potentially, and so you are probably going to do a DIY job on it. And that's why I've developed, or I'm developing, a kind of coaching offer. So for those people who definitely couldn't go out and work with an agency, that I'm offering or developing, soon to offer, a kind of month-long coaching offer. So you will have 2 or 3 sessions a week, kind of taking you through the process that I go through, kind of keeping you accountable, doing a bit of training, giving you a bit of feedback. So I guess the ultimate aim of that would be, to improve the end result. So I think I'm not. You can't push rocks. You can't push water uphill, or whatever it is. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. I guess I can help make things a little bit better, but certainly there's a problem in terms of cost of research when it comes to startups, and I don't think we can kind of ignore that.
Very good. But the coaching offer sounds great. Sounds really interesting.
Thanks, Tom. Gary, then Neil.
Great talk, Gideon. I love customer research. During my Halo days, obviously we had to speak to lots of drivers, and I would do probably at least 10 forms of communication to find out what they want, what they need, etc. Even from devising like competitions that was free, but I found out whether they liked pie mash and fish and chips and stuff like that, just to get into the brains of these people. So one is, I think when people look into customer research, they think it's a survey, that's it, and it's got questions, yeah? So one is there more than that? And the second one is you'll probably find that most people don't like customer research because they don't want to find out that what they're trying to sell at the moment is not the thing that the actual customer wants, and then it goes against what they're trying to sell, if that makes sense. So just your views on that.
Yeah, no, I think the second point is really valid for sure, and I think that I felt that, you know, when I went through the accelerator program, one of the questions I had a coach that I met with each month, and one of the questions she asked me was, why are you not collecting feedback about your business when your business is all about collecting feedback for other people's businesses? And I'm like, well, I'm a bit worried of what people might say, you know, I don't want to hear that bad news. And you know, that felt, when I said it out loud, completely ridiculous. So I now do that, and I do collect feedback, and you know, use it because it's useful. Yeah, I think there is a fear that you're going to hear stuff that you don't like, but I guess you know, the answer to that would be better to hear it now than in 6 months down the line, when you've invested much more money into building something that people might not fall in love with. So I guess, you know, not everyone can do research at every stage of their growth, right? But maybe think about where it's going to have most impact, you know, positive impact on your business. And I think your first point is fantastic. Like, there are so many different ways, creative ways of doing research, you know. Yeah, just quick polls, you know, send out to your taxi drivers. Do you like fish and chips or pie and mash? Just, it helps you kind of get into their minds, like you say. It helps you understand them a little bit more, where they're coming from, and then, you know, the more you can kind of empathize with them. You know, what's the first step that Hugh talks about in design thinking is empathy, right? So to get into the heads of your audience, your customers, you know, then you can easily make decisions about what they need and how you might develop solutions for them.
And just to comment, it was always really marginal between pie mash and fish and chips, and that was because all were from the East End, and then we was going up against everyone else. But that was the result.
Thanks, Gary.
Nice.
Neil.
Yeah, thanks, Gideon. Brilliant talk. My thought is around, or question is around user testing, because in my space, it's a lot of customer research was from the creative perspective open to interpretation, and then the best forms of feedback we were getting is actually putting prototypes, products in people's hands and then gaining the feedback from there. Obviously that's a narrower window that you can actually get into. So I just wanted to understand kind of how your process, how you worked with user testing. And then the second one was about incentivized user testing. You know, do you believe in offering rewards, bonuses, etc., to get people to give reviews, partake in these kind of surveys?
So kind of user testing as opposed to doing something before that, do you mean? I think
my experience is all about user testing. I guess I'm somebody that will consume research and respond to it, but then user testing in my mindset is actually research, but it's research on something that's moving.
Yeah, so I guess, you know, there's an opportunity before you've created your concepts and prototypes to do a bit of customer discovery, you know, audience discovery, you know, just really kind of understand them more, what their problem is, what their needs are. But I guess, you know, focusing for startups particularly on understanding the problem, the frustrations that they have, the kind of emotions that come out of you know, and critically, you know, what solutions have they got in place already? And I guess having that piece done would you could use that creatively as a bit of a springboard to generate ideas that you can then build into concepts and prototypes. So I guess in some way that early piece of research could help ensure your prototypes are what's the word, sort of more fit for purpose, if you like, more fit with that customer need. But certainly user testing, yeah, I do some of that. I think it's really useful. I think if you can get, you know, some quick wins out of that, then definitely why not? I think in terms of incentivizing people, I suppose I come from kind of the school of thought that you should be compensating people for their time. So if you're asking somebody to do a user test, which might take an hour, you know, that's an hour of their time. They ought to be paid in some form for that time. It's you know, it's a value exchange thing, isn't it? So if it depends who they are, right? If they are super engaged with your product and they're happy to do it for free, then, you know, and you haven't got much money to pay them, then I guess, you know, that's that. If they're happy with that, that's an arrangement that is okay. If you're taking people that are maybe potential customers that don't have that relationship with you, then I would suggest, you know, you'll get a better it's a kind of contract, isn't it? You know, if you want them to give you some of their time and give you their feedback, then there should be some reward for that, I think.
Okay, brilliant. And just, I mean, I guess it's always that balance. If you're incentivizing people to do it, can you know, but will people often argue it's skewed in your favor because you, in a sense, you know, paying them for it, but then, you know, it's you know, it's a challenge, but, you know, most people would obviously take it as, you know, it's an opportunity to be heard from the customer's perspective, and it's valid. But sometimes it's, you know, when you're in these corporate situations or you're in these design room situations, there's so many challenges to research if it doesn't actually serve somebody's individual purpose, which is political, I know, but
yeah, I've been in those situations. It can become very political. Like when I was at the BBC, you know, they sort of misused research quite heavily. So you'd have an argument between a channel controller and a commissioner of content, and the channel controller wanted to commission a certain program, the commissioner didn't, or the other way around, and they used research to kind of help them make that decision. And I think that's a bit daft, you know, especially in that creative space, because it's, you know, you can't necessarily rely. I would never encourage people to let research or let data make a decision for you. It should just be a kind of a device, a tool that you can inform a decision with. But if you know, it's a difference between being data driven and data led, isn't it? Don't just follow the data and tell it and let the data tell you what you should do. You know, I think we should still apply some common sense to that, and if it doesn't comply with where you want your business to go, then, you know, you have the right to ignore it, I guess, you know. But yeah, I think I think Tom would probably know this more than me, but there's kind of acquiescence bias, is it, Tom, where if you're paying somebody to do some research, they might feel compelled to say nice things about you. And I think the way to tackle that is just to be very super honest with them at the forefront and say that, you know, I find it easy because whenever I'm doing this stuff, it's not me that's made it. So I can just say, look, this is nothing to do with me. I didn't build this. I didn't create this. Give me complete honest feedback. And obviously you can really drill into what they like, but also equally what they don't like.
Brilliant, thank you. And just one of the points suddenly popped into my head, because my university course degree shows this week, and it's something that came from the University of Reading. They said they were doing customer reviews, and they actually only give 4 stars because they felt 5 stars actually gave you too much of a middle ground, where if you could give like 3 stars or whatever. I just wondered if you had any thoughts on that. I know it's a new piece of information, but I found it quite fascinating that you had to be you had to be one side or the other. So the middle, so you were either good or you were bad, because 3 stars was good, and then 4 stars was, you know, attainable. But it just gave, they felt it gave better feedback. Just something to throw in there. Obviously, I don't expect a response.
Yeah, no, I think there's definitely like lots of studies on this about how many options you should have on a scale. So it would be like stars or agreement, or, you know, like to dislike, and whether you should have that middle option, because in some ways it's a bit of a cop out, isn't it? If you haven't, you know, strongly agree to strongly disagree, and you've got that thing in the middle that says, oh, not meh, you know, don't really agree or disagree. I think I personally don't like that, but I think there's probably some evidence out there that would say that's a really important sort of data point to have. But yeah, I don't really have a firm opinion on that. I actually personally prefer to see people in one camp or the other. I think it just helps. But of course, if you're artificially forcing people into a camp they don't really want to be in, then that doesn't help. But personal preference, I'd say, for that.
I guess forcing people into the camp is the Pepsi challenge kind of moment, isn't it? You know, you've got to choose one way or the other.
yeah, exactly.
And for anyone that doesn't know the Pepsi challenge thing, that's obviously showing my age, but anyway.
Thanks, Neil. Great question. Gideon, it's been fantastic this morning, and
thank you.
Time very well spent. You're going to get a lot of love and big ups on LinkedIn today. That's what we're going to do.
Bless you. Thanks, Ollie.
That will be
everyone.
done later today. Hope to see everyone on Friday for the latest in Start to Stand Up Pitch Club mashup, which is going to be really good. And then we'll see everyone at 8:30 next Wednesday for our, and as I say, June's a big month for us. We've got the evening group starting in a couple of weeks, which we're all looking forward to. But that was really good, Gideon, and never ever as a founder undervalue the importance of market research. Very important.